The confusion on everyone's face is now they're not going to be confused at all. Going to say it and they're going to be like, I know exactly what scene you're talking about. I knew that they used
They'll
potatoes.
be amused by.
Hello, everyone. We ran into a couple of technical issues, but we're back once again here for another Nomen industry event live at the Dell stage. That was the first time we've done it all night. If you're looking for closed captionings, please head over to our YouTube and Facebook page. First of all, we would like to thank our sponsors, Dell and NVIDIA. Without them, we wouldn't be able to provide you with such amazing content as you're about to view right now. So, first off, I know that some of you have probably already heard this or maybe know about this, but for those of you at home that don't, potatoes. Now, I know it's strange that I start off a live stream by saying the word potatoes, but I remember a while back I was watching a behind the scenes of Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope. It's a phenomenal movie. If you haven't gotten a chance to see it, you should definitely watch it. And in that movie, there is a scene where the Millennium Falcon is trying to escape from TIE fighters. And it is just dipping and dodging through all of these meteors. And when you watch the practical effects artists talk about it, they said that some of those meteors weren't even meteors that they designed at all. They were, in fact, potatoes. Now, I've seen that scene many, many times. I've seen that scene in my dreams, and every time I've seen that scene, I've only seen meteors. I've never seen potatoes. And the level of creativity and troubleshooting and ingenuity that it took to do that really, really, really just blew my mind. It was ineffable, and I don't think that there was ever anybody that I would meet that would be able to do anything like that would blow my mind just like that, until I met the three people that we're about to talk to tonight. Now, while the days of potatoes are gone, making memorable moments that amplify stories via breathtaking visuals are not. Fresh off their monumental work, such as Mandalorian and Ahsoka, ladies and gentlemen, for the first time, please help me welcome Narwhal Studios.
Thank you for having us, everyone. You know, you work, and sometimes you forget to go back and look at the work you've done. So we're just excited to go through some of that and hopefully add some value to your lives and ours, right? So as we move through this, please save some questions because we love tackling those later. I have Safari and Mark here with me. My name is Felix. And just going to jump in. So, Narwhal Studios is a visualization and a virtual production studio. And we really want to talk about that. What does that mean and how does it fit? And so, we've been lucky to be involved with some of the IPs that you know, including the Star Wars franchise. So we were the virtual art department on 6+ seasons. We built hundreds of sets. We've worked with previs artists and with the VFX teams and the construction teams. And so whenever we engage these productions, we're really trying to visualize all of the production's requirements, not just the mind of the director, which is where this process came from, but also cater to the production designer, cinematographers, art directors, writers, and do those at a time where it's early, use Unreal Engine for what it's good at, which is really quick iteration in this part of the process. And over time, we started really honing in on more than that. We started looking at how to use Unreal Engine in production. And camera VFX came to be. Then we started looking into how to use Unreal Engine in post. Now we're doing final renders out of Unreal. So as we move through this, everything we've done and everything you see here is hosted out of a real-time engine if we've done it. This is a little reel of ours. We used to be named Happy Mushroom, so that's the little guy you saw there jump into the narwhal. And so this is some of our work on Obi-Wan. And we're doing a lot of side-by-side so that you can see what does it look like early on when we're working with those filmmakers, and then the shot next to it, which is the final shot, most of these of which have been shot out of an in-camera VFX stage. So they shot it into an LED screen. We do a lot of photogrammetry and set decoration. A lot of layout, right? A lot of layout. Design and layout both can be synonymous at times. And if you can notice in all of these, the tone is pretty much identical because the DP actually lit these at times months before. This is a test that we did for a masterclass. Here we're showing some of the work from Why Women Kill, where we created what we call a Lego set, and then we composited it. There were two forms of shots out of Unreal that we created. Some of them were rendering directly out of Unreal. Others were rendering out of Arnold and actually composited traditionally. And as you can tell, there's so many sets. Our TechViz is integrated into the process, so as we go, we're always seeing how it's going to be shot or how is it that it's going to be used in the final product. So we like to intertwine a lot of the previs in there. And we host meetings with these groups where they can either use a VR headset or a VCam, like a virtual camera, to be able to engage with the digital media themselves. Narwhal was also founded by myself, who has a previs background, Safari, who has a VFX background, and our third partner, who is here, Andrew Mack, is a game engineer. So you'll also notice that that's a lot of what Narwhal is. When you see the product, we use the game engines to help people in pre-production, but then we also could take it to final. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So that was just a summary. I'm Felix. So I'm Felix. I just want to give a little overview on my own history. I started as a previs artist. Eventually, well, I started a previs artist with this guy over here. He was my supervisor. And so we used to work at the third floor. I worked there for around 10 years. Eventually, I had the opportunity to go on to Jungle Book as a supervisor, and that was my first opportunity supervising. Now, Jungle Book was the first time where I had the opportunity to put together a real-time team. At the time, we were using Unity. It's still used in Lion King and some other productions. But shortly after Lion King, we formed this company. Now, it took us around 4 years to land on The Mandalorian. So we were already doing visualization out of Unreal for 4 years before we started going photoreal. That was when we went onto The Mandalorian. And so since The Mandalorian, we've done a lot of work from there, right? Since then, we've been able to work on Ant-Man, where I was the virtual production supervisor. We also built teams for 6 different seasons of The Mandalorian. I worked on Iron Man 2 with Jon Favreau early on, and then I worked with him on Jungle Book, and I worked with him on The Mandalorian, right? So like, there's a lot of history here that we went through. And so now we're here, and I have these guys. And they are the actual creative geniuses. Now I'm here to help creatives actually do what they love. So that's my passion.
Hey everybody, I'm Safari Sosebee. I have a background in visual effects. I am super passionate about film and video games. And when I went to college for computer animation, I actually was expecting to go into video games, but a visual effects house snagged me up, Luma Pictures. And so right after graduating Full Sail, I went to Luma Pictures and was there for 7 years. I mostly was focused on photorealistic environments, and I progressed from asset creation to lighting the sets, and then matte paintings, and then compositing. But then towards the end, I got more into creatures and characters. And then the last character being Thanos from the first Guardians of the Galaxy. Huge learning experience for that one. But I was always hearing, at the time I was roommates with Felix. We'd known each other from college. And I'd been hearing about previs and things that they were doing, and I was really interested in actually the broader strokes of planning a film and actually getting into the rooms with the art departments and the directors and the production designers. So I wanted to join his journey, the journey of pre-production, and since then I've been honored to be working on amazing projects like Mandalorian Season 1, started to supervise on Mandalorian Season 2, and since then I've supervised on about 5 or 6 projects. More recently, supervising art director, virtual art department, supervising art director, kind of overseeing Mandalorian Season 3 and Ahsoka, and then the most recent show that's yet to be released.
So on Season 1 of The Mandalorian, I was supervising, but then I went to manage the company, and he's our studio art director, and he supervised multiple teams running in tandem for the Star Wars franchise, and so other projects. That's the large one, and that's what we're here to talk about, right? We have smaller ones that we can discuss as well, but that's really the one we're focusing on today. Here are a couple pictures of us in the past. The bottom, top left, we got Safari testing ASC stage. Bottom left, him making a short film. We made a short film together. This is the Amazon stage from Shooting Fathead, a short film that we launched the Amazon stage with. This is some other stage I'm not sure we're looking at. And yeah, just want to show you guys some of the legacy.
Hi, my name's Mark Anthony Austin. I actually didn't start in computers at all. I started as a traditional animator in commercials in London. And I did that for 5 years, and it really scratched my storytelling itch. I've always been a visual storyteller. And I always looked at commercials as being 30-second stories. So it was a great 5 years to cut my teeth on storyboarding, animation. I even did some cell painting and directing of live action as well. But I bumped into ILM late in '93. They'd already just released Jurassic Park, which I saw twice in the theaters, blew my mind. So I bumped into them in London, and they hired me for Casper. And so I'll give you a clue as to how early I came into computer animation. My first job as Casper lead was to make Casper speak, because they'd done realistic dinosaurs, but they hadn't done character animation in CG. They hadn't had the hero character be a virtual character ever before, and they hadn't done lip sync. So my first task as Casper lead was make this Casper talk. So I was like, oh great, well, how am I going to do that? They split us into 2 groups. There was a group that was doing motion capture of the lips. Those results were the horror story Casper that I'm glad they never released, because it was the most scary renders you ever seen. That was their group. Our group, it was myself and a modeler, Kyle Odermatt, and we came up with this idea I would draw the phoneme shapes and expression shapes and the eyebrow shapes, asymmetrical, symmetrical, from the front, 3/4 and side, and Kyle would go and model those, and then we let the computer interpolate between the shapes, and lo and behold, it looked like Casper was talking. So little did we know we were inventing blend shapes, and it's a studio standard now. But that gives you an idea of how early I came into CG. I went to Disney for 13 years and supervised some characters there. But I met Previs and Felix and the Third Floor in 2009, and I fell in love with Previs. I always look at Previs as, in animation I was animating my shots, whereas Previs you're working in sequences. So I moved from individual trees to forests. So I just fell in love with the forest and working on these big chunks of the movie. And here I am with Narwhal Studios, and I'm scratching my storytelling itch with Previs, basically. You can see it. Oh, and I'm Boba Fett as well. You can Google it. I was Boba Fett in Episode 4, A New Hope. But yeah, it's a very Star Wars centric presentation we've given.
It was fitting. We have a little reel here for Mark.
Oh, these are just the shows that I supervised. If you look at my IMDb, it's chunky. It's a big chunky IMDb, but these are just the shows that I supervised in previs and postvis.
Can you talk to us about some of this?
This is Goosebumps. I did Goosebumps 1 and 2. I only got credited for 1 though. This is, the last 4 years I've been working for Netflix Animation until November of last year. And so you'll see a couple of Netflix shows on here. The one I want to show isn't released yet. It comes out in summer. But I can tell you what it is. It's Ultraman Rising. So that's coming out in summer. I think they're keeping it for an anniversary of Supervisor, because Supervisor, who invented Ultraman and invented Godzilla, he gave the movie his blessing. And so I think they're holding the release of the movie to coincide with anniversary of Supervisor, I think. This is the one and only Ivan. And most of the time you're not allowed to show the previs, or you're not given the previs to take home.
Ooh, I remember
So
this one.
hence I've had to use the final, but I do have a comparison reel that I'm going to be showing later on in the presentation. But this is Monster Problems, which was like #1, I think, in the Netflix charts over Christmas. And this is some clips from Ultraman Rising from the trailer.
Nice job, buddy.
That's it.
So before we get into the nitty-gritty of things, we just want to talk about what is visualization and virtual production and how do they fit in the filmmaking process. So traditional filmmaking has been pretty similar for the last century. And so I put this up so that we could make a little comparison, but just pretty recently, this process is getting more robust. And I see previs and VAD as two of the processes that help you design for any of the production and post-production process. Now, visualization, if you want to give a little description.
Well, actually, this is me in the mocap suit, actually, as Black Widow. But I co-supervised this with Nick Markle at the third floor, and they only gave away one supervisor credit, so who's going to get it, me or my boss? My boss got the credit. But
Will you give a description of visualization?
visualization, okay. Just an easy question like that. You see, I get the easy questions. What is pre-visualization, other than a very clumsy word that you kind of stumble through? I'll be referring to it as previs most of the time, because pre-visualization is hard on your ears, hard on my tongue. So, previs, the easiest I can condense it down to is showing the client their project ahead of production start. You know, and sometimes, if we're working on something like a theme park, ahead of construction start. But I always look at previs as a blueprint or a sketch. You know, you could enter into an oil painting, but if you did a sketch up front, there's no way that oil painting won't benefit from the sketch. There's no way that the production will not benefit from previs. You learn the good things, you learn the bad things, you learn the things that are indifferent. But I always look at it as a blueprint which you take with you and make a much better movie with. It's our goal to deliver the client's vision in a format that they can take and share with others, ultimately. If a picture speaks 1,000 words, just think what previs can do. Yeah, that's a pretty good answer. Yeah. For on the spot.
So I was always an asset builder and environment artist for previs. And so, and one of the issues of previs is that before Unreal, it just didn't look good enough for production designers and cinematographers to really feel engaged. That's when virtual production came in. We not only started using Unreal Engine 4 years before The Mandalorian, the reason why we were using it was because we wanted to include more people than just the director. And so the virtual set design process that we engage or with the virtual art department is really a previs process that is focused around the mind of the production designer who is really trying to get the visuals out there, but the cinematographer who also helps narrow the scope. I've been in so many meetings where a production designer is trying to lower, or the producer is verbalizing that this scene needs to be cheaper, and the solution almost always comes through the cinematographer. Make the environment darker, out of focus, show less of it, etc. And so that was just with real time. We were having all of that, but with the new tools 4 years into using Unreal, we got a call to go to the Mandalorian to do a proof of concept, and that's when in-camera VFX came in. And so with in-camera VFX, all of a sudden, we're taking those design sets, those previs sets, and we can take them to a photorealistic quality or to a quality where they're camera ready, and now we're shooting straight into our own sets. That was something that was unexpected and clearly, in my opinion, one of the funnest things that I ever experienced as an environment artist. So now we're seeing that real time is influencing all parts of production. You could use it in pre-production. When we're using it in pre-production, we're typically working either with headsets or with VCam. VCam, virtual camera, and having something in your hands, we were doing it at the third floor ages ago. Like, that was, and it was straight into Maya. However, again, the environments were gray, they were straight out of Maya, nothing really looked good enough to be able to engage some of those cinematographers. Now, everything looks great, and I think the challenge is more around management and making sure that the vision is correct, because getting to the pretty part is so much easier. So how do they fit in the filmmaking process? Well, in pre-pro, we have real-time previs, we have virtual set design, and we have virtual production tools like VR, VCam, and mocap. In production, we're seeing in-camera VFX. We're also seeing in-camera compositing. You can shoot into a green screen and right there see the composite to at least make a decision around where you want your character, how you want to frame your shots, get the information on the shoot day. And during post, we're starting to engage a lot more with VFX compositing straight out of Unreal. So now Unreal could render render passes, and you could go straight out. And really, it's just a bit of post brought to pre. A lot of people ask, like, where does this process come from? If you're a producer, you might ask, where do I get the budget from? And so the truth is, where did previs get the budget from? They got it from layout animation. The work that they do in previs has to be done at some point. It's just being brought from post to pre. Same thing with environments. Every previs shot starts with an environment. So why not bring more of what's happening in post around the layout, and instead of having that happen later, have your production designer and your art directors engage that and raise the quality of your digital assets, raise the quality of your digital worlds. And then we got final environments from post, a little bit of final from the final parts of post, and we brought it to pre. Now, what's super fascinating about this is that with Unreal, you can have an analog team and a digital team running in tandem, which actually has a huge potential to shorten your production schedule. And that's the biggest reason why a lot of the productions that we've mentioned here see such a value here, right? You have your filmmakers involved in setting the foundational assets of your entire product. You have a potential shortened timeline due to having the analog and digital team working in tandem, and the output of what we're doing is visual. So when we're working with these creatives and they're coming up with ideas, we're showing them that live, and you can actually make decisions, because it is really hard for some people to visualize what you're trying to say. Everyone has a different idea in their head anyways. So these are some of the benefits that we've seen are the most impactful with these processes. Now, what is Narwhal Studios' approach, right? Everyone has different ways of doing things, so we want to be clear here, and this is our approach. Maybe other people have different ways of doing it. We're going to show examples of how we've done it. And hopefully it's something that you guys can use as well. So first of all, let's go in. We have virtual production consultation. We often we're seeing, this is a new process. a lot of the questions that we get is like, how much can we do in camera VFX? So we often do a production consultation. You'll actually see here this image this is Andrew Jones, production designer on The Mandalorian. I worked with him on my first movie, Alice in Wonderland, way back in the day. And then this is one of the directors from one of the seasons. You know his name?
Rick, I forget his last name.
Rick. This image here is an actual model that was printed onto a paper, a top-down of a model in Maya and or Unreal. And those round yellow spheres are locations where the LED screen is intersecting with the environment. So these are shots. Right now, he's pointing at the ship here, right here, that's actually a ship. The camera is gonna be in this area, and everything outside that is not yellow is virtual. So something to note. This is the kind of work that we do when we're consulting. How much of the script are you gonna do? Well, let's just throw it in there and check and like figure out what's gonna go where. Now, we put a little example of the deliverables. We're just gonna move through that. So I wanna pass it off to Safari for the concept development. Thank you.
So concept development is very much it's proof of concept. It involves any kind of figuring out the idea of something. And you can either do a really small proof of concept for this stage or something a little bit beefier. It's mostly just to get into the first initial stages of trying to solidify a process. Like for The Mandalorian, we went through a process of kind of figuring out the fidelity that Unreal 4 can hold, how you can actually scan an asset, bring it in, and then light that in a way that's photorealistic. So that's just an example, and we'll show that in a second, a version of that. But the idea is that you want to prove out a process before you start getting into that process.
And then what does concept development look like for you, Mark? For
Concept development?
For pitch viz and stuff like that.
I mean, if someone's coming to me for previs, there's only three things I hope they turn up with. One is a storyboard, one is some artwork, and the third is a script. And because I'm trying to create a sequence, and a sequence isn't a standalone, a sequence is a sequence within sequences, just as a shot is a shot within shots. So the script kind of defines the context of that sequence. Is that the question you asked sufficient for? The storyboard is great because storyboard not only informs you on the amount of shots, but also the props, the environments, the vehicles, the characters. You can get a good count of everything you need from assets. And artwork is going to just bring you closer to that vision or make your vision or your interpretation of the client's vision more accurate. So those are things I hope for when I have a consultation with the client.
So like often when we come onto projects, we don't have those things to launch the virtual set design or to launch the previs, and so that's where we help them with concept art or we help them with storyboards to really flesh out that concept, but we have seen an increase in what Safari was mentioning, which is the proof of concept. The proof of concept is something that we've had to engage because a lot of stories want to use this process, and the most effective way that we have found to use this is to make a shot or you find something in your script to do an example and have your creatives work on it. So we've done that with a lot of projects.
And this is one of those examples. This is a replica of one of the proof of concepts we created. This is it's trying to show the fidelity in Unreal Engine 4. This was in 2018. We were trying to show that you can scan physical set dressing and then clean that up, get that optimized, bring that into Unreal, and then with proper lighting and color balance, you can get it to look closer to photorealistic, and definitely something that can be used for a background on ICVFX projects or even non-ICVFX projects.
When we started on The Mandalorian, if you can imagine, there wasn't a lot of concept art or storyboards to create. I mean, it's Star Wars. So they had Doug Chang developing a lot of the concept art. However, what they didn't have was understanding how to make Unreal look photoreal. And that was us. We actually worked with them on creating that proof of concept. They also didn't know how to make something look photoreal in Unreal and in a traditional render, like Arnold. So these are the same assets in both Unreal and then in a traditional render, and we rendered both of them, and we put them side by side so that you can see with the same sky dome, and if you understand how to tweak things appropriately in the way someone like Safari does, that you can actually develop assets and or environments in Unreal that then carry through a VFX pipeline. And so we've used this, and we've done a lot of proof of concepts and to help projects secure their green light, including The Mandalorian, Jurassic World VR, Call of the Wild, Avatar, Wish I Was Here, Trevor. So it's been something that we recommend to productions, that especially if they want to use virtual production at a certain scale. And we have some of the deliverables here. Whenever we do this phase, we're delivering concept art, storyboards, proof of concepts. This phase typically runs between 4 to 12 weeks. I would probably shorten that because 12 weeks is might be a little bit long, but 12 weeks is if you're trying to develop the concept for a whole season or a whole show, right? Like if you have multiple characters, multiple worlds, you need storyboards, concept art, and a proof of concept, then you need a couple weeks. But like the one we just showed you, these two here, and we also have had additional visuals. We did this in a 3-week period. And so it's of course based on what the requirements of the project is, but between 4 to 12 weeks. And so that includes an entire look for the production, or as much as you have requested, and that's that. So we're gonna move into virtual set design.
So virtual set design is the building of digital sets in pre-production with the production designer and or VFX supervisor. These virtual sets are we break them into these major buckets. Locations being kind of like the grouping of sets, the sets being the base of the base structure, and then the set variants being lighting variants or set dressing, depends on the scene and action that plays out.
So I want to put you all in the mind of a filmmaker, because one thing that we work hard to do is how to communicate this in a way that a filmmaker would. And so I don't know what your background is, so excuse me if I'm maybe over-explaining. There's a process that production designers and movies typically engage with called location scouts. And so as we worked through this process, we really wanted to adopt those same words and those same processes. So you'll find that often we're bringing these things up to help verbalize like the film process, but now it's digital. So locations, if you were gonna shoot in example, like on Avengers, they did a location scout to New York. And New York had a bunch of sets. So they had different locations inside of locations within locations. Those are the sets within New York. But then maybe there's a scene with Black Widow, or I guess it was, no, that's on my mind. Maybe there's a scene with Black Widow on a motorbike in between Main Street, and that's daytime, but there might be another scene on that same street that's nighttime. Those are variants of the same location. So that's a lot of why we're naming it this. Now, a location could be called an environment. It could be called a real-time set. It could be called, so there's different things that you can call this, but it's all these, I guess what they have in common is that they're Unreal Engine environments. It's just the way that you group them allows you to actually get savings out of it, because a location might actually share all the same assets. And so you knowing that from the get-go is something that's a smart move, because you're going to be able to, the producer, if you're an artist and you're organizing it like that, the producer's going to love you, because now they know what they're saving, where it's being shared, etc.
And with each virtual set, these are the stages that we go through. First one being a very basic layout. We're kind of seeking the approval of, is this the right scale? Is this the right layout for this set? Like major hero assets, we put those in place first so that we're not distracted by detail. Like the two columns coming down, the big pipe on the left, all these different elements are incrementally brought in so that we could say, here are the things that are the major aspects of this set. Once we have the layout that's pretty close to agreed upon by the production designer and everyone else, we go into color and light, and we try to incrementally get each part of the assets further and further along. Once we get in a good spot with an asset, we may just go on to prioritizing another asset. And then at the same time, we work on lighting with the direction of photography so that we can understand what exactly will be in light. Because a lot of that stuff is in shadow, and so we want to make sure we get that in early, and then work on the parts that are going to be in light. Once we get a good approval on those things, which takes a good amount of the time, and then we get into the final look so that we can polish and get really the hero assets ready for turnover.
I want to build on some of what he said. He said that if it's in shadow, it's important to know, right? And I think you've all seen the VFX breakdowns where there's all these assets and then a cloud comes in and you never had to model that, right? So a big motivation of ours here was to build things in context and to work with those creatives in context. We never have shown turntable. It just seems like a waste of time because this is what you're making. And when you get caught in turntables and you don't really understand the story or try to think like the storyteller, let's be honest, if it's a barrel, you could rotate it 3 times and it's 3 different barrels because you're looking through a shot. So when we're working with productions, we're really helping them drive to these approvals. We help them get to those approvals so that they can arrive at their timeline or their deliverables on time. And that's a lot of what he's doing here. Now, in this chapter, we're going over virtual set design, and then soon we'll go over our final pixel sets or in-camera VFX sets as well. Before I move from here, I guess the point is the layout really takes, this is like a week of work, then you get to the color and light, that might be 2 more weeks, and then you get to get the final pixel, that might be 2 to 10 more weeks, right? The first 2 stages, the previs stages are, but what if you're going to make a junkyard and there's literally thousands of aliens of assets? That's something that you need to consider. And in pre-production, how is it that you actually manage the budget? You make those decisions around what you have to cut to satisfy the story, but still get the level of quality you want and not break the bank. Here's another example that I did, and so I was supervising. Now on the left here, similar thing. When we're having our meetings, we're driving for approval. Down here in this bottom left, this is actually from a location scout. So like when we're working on this, all the creatives were critiquing things out of the headset and really working to understand the story. And what I always find really fascinating is how close, like sometimes we work on these things months and months before they go to the shoot, and then you look at the final, it's pretty much identical. Just have a little video here. Uh-oh, you got this. There we go. So on this project, it was very focused on design and tech viz. And you see those green cameras? Those are the cameras that the cinematographer and the directors laid out of the scouts. Now, when we have scouts, they might be, it doesn't always have to be in VR. The word scout, the way we use it is a meeting where everyone gets to visit those locations and make decisions together. And so we have tools for that now, like VR, but we were doing that process just through a screen share beforehand. It's about the process and the intention of the meeting. And inside of those meetings where we're getting everyone together, we're driving for approval. Hey, in this meeting we need to get the approval for the layout to make it on time, or in the next meeting we're getting approval on the light or the color versus the final result. Now here we were working really close with the art department, so the set designers in the art department were also sharing with the virtual set designers, and then we would host these meetings, and there's a really nice marriage between the art department, the construction team, VFX, cinematography, the director.
And because you're working with the art department at the stage, you have access to incredible people who are just so talented. This is an example of working with a model maker, and Jason Mahakian has been working on Mandalorian Season 1 and all the way through on any project that Andrew Jones has been on. This is an example of his miniature of the Cetos. Cetos is the planet that this is on, and he made this Stonehenge slab so that they could understand the physical set and how it extends to this other area and what the design is for this. And then he created these little stones, these worn out stones that we then took, photogrammetry. It's a bunch of photos that you can compile into a 3D asset, and those photos get projected onto that 3D asset. And actually the top right image is Unreal, and it is using his assets. We did a version that was a worn-out version that informed him, and then he went through and did all the stones, laid them out in a certain way, and then we scanned those back in and continued development on those.
So it's like, once you have them in Unreal, we're having that scout. On this project, they were in VR headsets, and they would visit it together, and they see this location, and we take it further. So I've heard there's a lot of intimidation for this process, but the truth is that virtual production is not like VFX in the sense that it's going to replace anything else. This is a good example of how these model makers are actually extremely welcome in this process, because let's be honest, if you're someone working on a computer, you're probably in an age range. And some of these individuals have a lot more experience than us. And that's a lot of what I'm very passionate about. It's about bringing that traditional, that experience. And so this is a good example. Jason is someone that I also worked with on many of my movies in the past. We worked on Alice in Wonderland together as well, which is, I think, 15, 20 years ago, almost. And so I really was happy to work with him here again, and we've worked with him on many of the seasons for Star Wars, because it's such a great example of how with these mediums you could marry the digital and the physical. Here's another example.
Well, this one is, it's just a really basic model. The one in the middle, the image in the middle, shows a miniature version of these things called Zulu blocks. And they are these platforms that they put onto stages so that they can add height to their physical stage. So they had little tiny versions of that, and they gave us the dimensions of those, and we made versions in Unreal. So we did a version on the left, a couple of different variations of the layout, so that we could inform. Mostly it was about, we were focused on the virtual extension, but the physical set had to marry into the virtual. So we were just doing a little exercise of how does this look when we just move things around and kind of place mega scans on top of those. So then we went through a couple iterations. Art department had the miniature that they organized into a new layout, a couple new layouts for us to try out. And then we moved those around, kept those different layouts so that they can revisit it. And then we, when we placed those Zulu blocks, we put the mega scans and all the dressing on top. But even the rocks along the edges, they knew how many rocks they wanted to create on the physical set, or how much was in budget and all this other stuff that goes into it, but they know exactly how high those things are supposed to be. And so they gave us that layout. It's just a top-down photo of that little miniature, and then we were able to line that up in our virtual volume, which is on the far right. Yep. And we're able to bring that in, see it top down, and then move those Zulu blocks and rocks around so that it was based on their physical layout. And now we knew how the top of the hill was supposed to terminate along the edges. And then that way we can continue our virtual ground.
I want to talk about those Zulu boxes a second. So I think that came from Avatar or Jungle Book. I know it's the same crew. That crew has done a bunch of stuff. A lot of the terms that come for this process came from the same crew. And long story short, one of the the hardest things to do when you're building a physical set is what you're stepping on. Like, that's the part that it needs to be the most secure. You can't just throw a rock there and then your most paid actor falls off. Good luck. So that is a lot of what these Zulu pieces are built. Zulu pieces are designed to be flexible on the stage physically. So those things are actually like pretty big physically. I think this is like a 100-foot stage. So those Zulu pieces are on the stage, and they create this material that looks like dirt or looks like this down here, and they lay it on top of the Zulu pieces, right? So they lay it on top. A lot of that planning we're also doing with those creatives, so that by the time they get to the day, they know exactly how to lay out the Zulu pieces, where to put that ground, where are the rocks needed so that it transitions into the virtual set. That could also be a green screen in the back there. This could also be a location. Like, if you don't want to fly your whole crew to New York, you do this kind of work.
This is an example of, we had turned over a set. It was the hangar for in Ahsoka, and this is work that we have to kind of reconcile after we turn something over, or something that we want to make sure that the next team that's working on those sets, in this case it was ILM, who was continuing the development of the set. We had gotten word that there was going to be the need for another volume location and another scene playing out in this hangar. And before, we were working on the back wall, and we weren't really seeing it as much in the cameras. So we had packaged this up and sent that along, and then eventually a new scene came up, or something that was needing to use this set but in a different location. So now that back wall is going to be a lot more visible. And so this is part of just working with art department and making sure that we have all the information needed, so that when we are talking with all the key creatives, we can compile all that info and send that off to the appropriate teams. And later on we'll talk about or show the turnover documents. And then the image on the bottom right is showing that there was a set dressing piece that was the wrong language. It was a Imperial crate that we had just used to place for placeholder, because the set decorator hadn't rented or built the piece that was going to be propagated in the virtual. So she highlighted the piece that she wanted in the virtual set that she was going to have in the physical set. So yeah, that green one there, where the chest piece of Ahsoka is standing, she was going to place the set dressing in that exact order. And then she saw the other pieces, and she said, just completely replace all those with this one piece, because this is the language. And so it's the same thing. We have to highlight those different changes, and then that's what we pass off to the next team that's preparing those sets.
So set decorators are one of the roles I feel like are most underappreciated in a lot of what we do. And so when you see CG in movies and you could tell it's CG, I often blame it to there not being a set decorator. So one of the most important lessons that I learned from a set decorator was how boxes stack. It's stuff like that. Like, we put some military crates up and we just stack them, and she's like, that would never work that way. And so how do you know that if you're a CG artist? You just model things and you put them on top of each other. And so this is a good example of like the kind of work that a set decorator brings. Like, they look at things and they go, something doesn't feel right here. That doesn't work like that. And so this is a good example of that.
Amanda Serino, by the way, is the set decorator. She's incredible.
She's incredible.
This is the example of the turnover document. So this is an example for 3 different projects.
Can you explain what a turnover document is?
Oh yeah, I get a little ahead of myself. So the turnover document for for these virtual sets. We've designed these sets through many weeks, and we compile a bunch of information, and there may be some important things to make sure that the next team working on it understands, or the use case for that virtual set. So it's just a compilation of all the different notes from the key creatives that are available to anybody who wants to understand the use for that set.
We've said blueprint a lot of times. In many ways, this is the final product of that blueprint, right? It's you do the work, you work with everyone. The beautiful part is you have everyone together, but like the director's thinking in an animated medium, and there might be some shots. Now, if you're in the art department, this is the language that they speak. Like, I know you know that. They basically build these maps of all the action and where it's going to happen and how, and so again, adopting that process, we came up with our own, and so ours encapsulates the director's vision, the production designers, the set decorators, the VFX supervisors, the writers, and the producers. And so a lot of people have asked us, how do you make sure things don't change later, or that the day of the shoot it's going to be okay? This is how they all sign off on this, right? They all sign off on their vision. And then they can trust that the construction team's going to get their vision. Like, we get AAA teams for a reason. That's all of you, right? There's a reason why you came to Nomen and you're learning all this. So this gets passed off from the design phase, which is the previs and the design phase with the VAD, gets passed off to the construction team, both the physical construction and the digital construction, because maybe you have some assets in there. You're like, oh no, I want to plus that digital asset, or maybe it's like, the Zulu pieces need to be placed appropriately. VFX teams. For those of you that have worked in VFX like me, like I never knew what the hell happened before. Like, what the hell? What's the story? Why did this decision happen? So these turnover documents at times could be very long and robust, with like reference from like months of working on it, and we make sure that it's consolidated with the creatives so that the next teams can carry on that vision, and those key creatives could be off the project and go do something else and not worry about their vision not carrying through. So we put a lot of work into this one. We've had to build tools to be able to capture all the data, because there's camera placements, there's camera stills, there's obviously the sets, there's animation a lot of times. And so on the left for Ahsoka, that's an 8-month-long project where we delivered 70 plus sets, and that's 70 plus turnover documents. Fathead was a project that was around a 4-week project. We delivered 3 sets, 3 of those documents. And Treasure Imagination was a 2-week project where we also delivered 4 virtual sets. So just want to show you a range. You could do 2-week projects, you could do 4-week projects, or you could do 8-month projects in this process. But we try not to sacrifice some of those essential steps so that we can get to the shoot successfully.
Also, these are just 3 pages of a longer document. So the first page is describing the whole thing, then there's other pages that describe reference and what the thought process was for these kind of things, that kind of stuff. But it's not just 3 pages for a turnover document. Like you said, it is extensive, but you can't fit it on 1 page.
Yeah. Yeah, and often it's like, if you think about how many key creatives, based on that, the document might get longer, because your cinematographer might have placed all the 200 shots that he wants in the sequence, and so you could have those in there as well. So deliverables during this time.
The deliverables really are the sets, the virtual location sets and their variants, and then that turnover document, the technical details of all the different placement, all the different reference and all that. These virtual sets are, depending on the asset library and things that are available, 2 to 5 weeks, typically in the design phase. You can blast through a really decent environment with the proper lighting and the proper layout of all the different things, like set dressing, to the point where everyone's approving it. And really, this only takes an art director and some support for the set. So some asset help and lighting and all that.
The reason why I think it's important to show some of this, we're trying to demystify this process a little bit. I think it's gotten a little bit complicated when people talk about it. Like, people think that, oh, how many team members do you have? Typically, it's just Safari and maybe one support artist or two. Now, if you go to a project of 8 to 10 months and you have 200 plus sets to deliver, yeah, that's a 15-person team, right? But all of these things really is about a very small core. And then you grow based on the bulk. So this is an example of 3 virtual locations with 6 to 15 virtual sets. That's between 2 to 5 weeks, right? And so that's really what we want to show. There's some caveats attached around wanting reference and strong concept art, and the fact that you're probably going to have to work closely with that production designer, right? That's a big requirement if you want to do this. Or if the production designer is not available, the VFX supervisor or the VFX producer, right? So
Those are all great, but the way to review, no, that's fine.
okay, I thought you were going back.
The virtual sets have to be reviewed in some way, and that's through virtual location scouting, and that is bringing everyone into a room virtually to view the sets and explore them through the camera, the shot camera, or just explore them through some sort of perspective camera, just to see the entirety of the set, so that they can understand the context.
When we engage, so we started doing virtual location scouting, I believe, before anyone else in this process. We did this, if we started the Mandalorian in 2018, we were doing this in 2013, maybe even sooner. And so using it as a pre-production process that can actually help a production designer. And the reason we did it was because in a VFX process, you're mostly doing turntables, and we wanted to bring a process that was familiar, and this was it. Visit the location.
Now, the 3 major different ways you can do that is through the 2 remote or on location. You can do it through virtual reality, which is the best way to view these sets. Spatially, it's different than seeing it on a monitor. But
Especially if you're a production designer.
yeah, huge benefit. On the first 2 seasons of The Mandalorian, when we were in office, the DP would bring up his team, the production designer would bring in Green's department, and anyone else that had a question about the set, he would bring them into the session, into a VR session, and just explore it. And just to have them look around, it was so engaging, and they were able to understand what they were talking about. They can continue the conversation there.
Something I want to note here too, screen share is the version we've been doing for a long time. When I worked on Jungle Book out of Unity, actually there's a position in all of this that we call the hot seat. And so the hot seat is an artist, a digital artist that might use Unreal. Back in the day, I was just using Maya. And you'll have the director behind you, the production designer, everyone basically asking you to either tweak things. Hey, can I see this camera shot? Because they're really just trying to discover the world and maybe improve the story. And so the screen share is the most popular one, and it's the one that's been around for the most time. What the Mandalorian season 1, actually season 2, season 1 we were just doing single person scouts like this. On season 1 of The Mandalorian, we started using virtual location scouting for singular person. And so what was amazing about it was that all of a sudden, I'm not in the hot seat. I'm just enabling the person that is in there doing the thing that they do. And so that all of a sudden gave us the speed of you're getting twice the amount of speed there, because I can work on my computer and do things, and you can work on your computer and do things as well. Production designer who's never really used anything digital, right? So all of a sudden they can engage the medium. Fast forward to season 2, that's the middle one. And so I guess
it's actually
these
Lion King right there.
This is from
Yeah.
Lion King. Cool. So this is from Lion King, but we actually did a process like this that was from The Mandalorian out of Unreal. On Lion King, they're using Unity. Fast forward to this process, you're all of a sudden you have all, let's say, You have 3 people there, that's 3 times the amount of data and information, and they get to talk to each other and see each other, and literally you're there just facilitating and getting notes. And so the one that it's turned into now, it's remote. Now we ship computers to people, and you all just meet in the cloud, and we get to facilitate. So it's really evolved from this art form where one person is a bottleneck, right? Like if I'm on Jungle Book, I'm a bottleneck. There's 5 people, the cinematographer's like, go to that other one. This person's like, oh, not yet, I'm still trying. They don't have to do that anymore. In this new process, they're all talking to each other. Hey, can I show you this? They go, they sit behind the director, they put a camera down, the director might draw where the person's at. Like it's a completely different way of working when it comes to the process. And there's a misconception that in-camera VFX and the LED screen makes cheaper. This is the process that makes it cheaper because they get to now decide what goes to previs, what goes to VFX, what's hard, what is it that they don't understand? I mean, they've been doing this for a long time, and if they understand, they don't need to, like if they tell you they understand and they understand seeing how they're gonna get it, most likely they do, right? And if they don't, the visual is gonna help them understand how. So this process really, the way that I've seen it evolve and the way I see them engage is what I attribute to those savings that you guys are seeing people talking about out there around this process. Now, fast forward to entering in-camera VFX, now you have added savings, right? Because all of a sudden you could get minutes out of some of these sets, and we're gonna go into that later. But this process really, when it comes to like honing in on the scope, the producers in here are always, all right, but this is too expensive, and you'll hear them talk about how to make it for cheaper, and look at it and make it for cheaper. The sets don't have to be photoreal to make those decisions either. Sometimes they look grayscale. Sometimes they look further. It's scale. It's about the conversation and you being an enabler with these tools and helping them do what they already have been doing for a long time. Here's a couple pictures. So this is from, I thought this was from The Mandalorian, but it isn't. This is a picture from another project of ours, just to show a little bit of how we mount them. Like it could just be in a normal office, or you could be at home. Who's that guy? Down here we have a screen share, right, where we're in there. It looks like one person's in VR. And so here's a shot to show you the impact, right? You have Safari, who was the person that's enabling this meeting and hosting. Dave Filoni, Andrew Jones. Dave Filoni, who co-directed and many times produced. Dave Filoni is a body of knowledge in Star Wars. My God, it's insane. And then Andrew Jones, who is our production designer for the physical. Clint Spillers, virtual production supervisor, producer. Eric Steelberg, DP. Mm-hmm. Richard Bluff, VFX supervisor at ILM.
Q-Tran.
Director?
Q? Mm-hmm. DP.
DP. Doug Chang, another production designer, and then Dave Filoni, and then Jon Favreau. And here you see Jones, Filoni, like they're all in VR headsets. Back here, that square means that they're screen sharing. So you could have a computer at home, use an Xbox controller. You don't always have to put the VR headset, or just use the mouse and move around in Unreal. Right? So like the virtual location scout process, it's more about the intention of the meeting, which is to get them all in there, and the host, Safari, is helping, and or the virtual production supervisor, depending on who's the person that's hosting the meeting, and is there to help drive the meeting towards an approval. Maybe approval of the layout, maybe approval of the color and light, maybe it's approval of the final, because this could look all the way up to final. And so during these meetings, they're not just approving that, but they're also talking about the story, right? To get approval on those things, they're actually not talking about the layout at all. They're just talking about the story they're trying to write. And it's hard to put into words how impactful those meetings have felt when they're just in here shooting the shit on an alien planet.
So this is an example. There's in each scout, they're placing cameras. So in Unreal, they have the multi-user session and the virtual location scout tools. One of the tools that you can bring up is a virtual camera. And so what they're doing is talking through the set, typically the virtual volume, the placement of the volume. They can move that thing wherever just to explore new areas. And that's where the ICVFX LED screen is located within the virtual world. They're also placing cameras all over the place. So this is an example of this is the Stonehenge on Peridia in Ahsoka. There's 4, 5 set variants for this. So different lighting scenarios, different scenes. And so they were always kind of wondering what the previous scenes were that you're at this location, just for reference. So when they placed those cameras in the previous set variants, they asked us to bring these in so that they can view them, and made these big blackboards with the images from the previous sessions so that they can view it in context, this set that they were scouting, in context with the other scenes. And
so this right here, in a 2 to 3 hour session, you're delivering 50 plus screenshots, right? Like, that's way faster. You have 5 people placing screenshots than me having to fucking place that one by one in 3 hours. Like, I was not producing 50 good screenshots, right? You have Eric Spielberg in there. You have Jon Favreau. You have Dave Filoni. They're placing cameras. It's a completely different ballgame. They're also going, hey, can you just throw a little mountain back there? Yeah, throw a cube back there that represents a mountain. And it's a completely different way of getting that quick iteration. Now these go to previs. These go to VFX. These go to the VAD. These basically, with these location scout meetings, you're kicking off all the other teams. I've always been really impressed with how many still frames we got. We had to build tools around it to be able to satisfy the bulk and email it immediately after the producer or whoever else, because these still frames are also how you budget. Like, they look at these, they go, this is gonna be too expensive. Like, let's blur this out, or let's turn this dark, or let's build less of a set, etc. To put it in perspective, between 2018 and 2023, we had 2,130 virtual location scouts. Now, some of those include the one-on-ones with the production designer. Every single day, there is a location scout with the production designer, or a virtual stage walk, as we used to call it, which is really when a production designer, they're responsible for the look of the film. They typically have a stage. Every day they go down to the stage and they look at the assets, or the props, or the set decoration. So that's the quantity that we did of those scouts with those creatives in those years. We had 30 plus creatives, AKA all of the key creatives for all those seasons, which really honed in on a huge list of tools, because every creative likes to work differently. Some production designers have a concept art background. Some of them have a location scout background, like Andrew Jones, and they have different approaches. And so the amount of frames that we produced is insane. It's incomprehensible to me, right? Like, when we went back and we started looking at how many frames were produced, let's remember, each one of these has 10 episodes, right? So, like, this is 8 months per, approximately between 6 to 8 months per, where every week we're sitting with all 6 of them, where they're all setting sets. Every single time those end, we process the information, we reintegrate it. And so we have found that this process is easier when it's small, but when it grows, it is important to have tools, the right team, etc. But we really just I really wanted to show this to show that I think that if it wasn't valuable, it wouldn't have been used. And this really shows me that it was. So, a little bit of deliverables, just to move through this one a little faster. After those meetings, similar to the turnover document that you saw earlier, we give them a location report, all of the still frames, and the 3D models from Unreal, because they also move things, and there's like, you're doing things live, it's real time. In a timeline of 2 to 5 weeks, it says here we're having between 1 to 3 hour scout sessions to run a scout, that art director, one environment artist, one tech artist. So it's small footprint as well. And so in one scout, we're delivering between 40 to 80 frames, depending on really how many people you have is one of them, and how much you're going to go through. Sometimes we go through 6 locations, right? 7 locations in one 3-hour session, depending on how much you have to do. And so that's a lot of what we're driving. If you're trying to get to a shoot on time, or even if it's not using in-camera VFX, we're driving towards those approvals so that you can actually get there on time.
Previs. Well, I've already spoken about what previs is. I think we want to talk about the schedule of how long it takes to do previs.
Hey, how about this image here?
Sorry? Oh, the image. There's a story attached to that image. We worked on the second 300 movie, and we actually scanned Felix's face as the swimmers that had the bombs on their back that swam to the Greek ships and blew them up. And it was the most scariest thing, seeing hundreds of swimming Felixes, semi-naked as well. It was the most scariest thing, but yeah. So schedule. I'm going to kind of give you an example of the last 4 years that I've been doing previs. The last 4 years I've been doing previs pandemic, so I've been working solo at home. And so upon being delivered the storyboard and talking to the director, and I guess upon receiving the assets, I can't do any previs without a set or characters or props. I do the similar thing to what we've been talking about here, is location scout. So I take the storyboard or the key storyboards, and I set up my camera with the set just to make sure that the set is giving the directors what they want. So I do that before we move ahead, but then usually for an average length sequence, it takes 2 to 3 weeks for me to block out the whole thing with stepped poses. And the reason I use stepped poses is because it's way easier to edit, because way easier to shift timing around, especially when you're working with previs and you have to choreograph multiple moving pieces together. So I work on stepped poses, plus stepped poses you can hand off to somebody, and it's a great blueprint for them to do accurate mocap to just drop in. So 2 to 3 weeks to do my first pass at the sequence. And I like to do my first pass following the storyboards like the Bible. But I found that whenever you deviate from the storyboards, at one point someone says, oh, how did we do it in the storyboards? And you don't have that shot. So I tend to do the first pass as the storyboards. We have the first round of notes. Typically, I get my notes. I have a week to do those, and we have a round 2, we have a round 3. So I guess from beginning to end, average is about 6 weeks to do a sequence. Now that doesn't mean you can't have mocap. I mean, everything I do, I can hand off to Safari to do all his magic and import into Unreal. If you're going to have mocap, it's just going to tack on either an extra week or 2, or it's going to require hiring an extra artist. Now the caveats are, obviously if you have a sequence which is 120 shots long, that's going to take you a bit more than 2 to 3 weeks. It's probably going to be an extra week on there. If you have like multiple moving pieces, like armies clashing together, if it's a scene complexity is going to add something to the schedule, maybe a week or 2, or as I said, bring on extra artists. The great thing about the last 4 years is that whenever I did my sequence, I would present it. I was working for Netflix Animation in Burbank, but as I said, working from home. But every time I presented my sequence for the rounds, every department head was present. So just as we've been talking about involving all the other creatives, every department head was there to see every iteration and the evolution of that sequence. So anyone can chime in at any point and say, oh, actually I've done a new design for this set, or I've moved some stuff around in this set that you might want to incorporate in your previs. The reason that you want to involve all these people is that you want to give value to your previs. If you're going to pay for the previs, then why not make it work for you for every department head? Let it be the playground for every department head rather than just, I've done previs before for just the visual effects supervisor, and he will take it to the director. You don't even see the director. Whenever you've got those gateways, it muddies the process, it slows the process, and it has a tendency to try and make the process less accurate than it could be if you involved all those people. I do have an example of a comparison, and this was from Back to the Outback, and you'll notice that even
Mark's is on the right.
The finals
it's so
on-
close that I'm just explaining the one on the right is the stepped animation.
Yeah. You notice that even though it goes out of sync every now and again, it will come back in sync because, ultimately when they do the final animation, they're going to have more to trim or more information to make that decision of how long to make that shot, where to make that cut point. But each of because all the creatives were involved, all of the shots were used. There wasn't any waste. And so I found that involving all those department heads just made for better previs, more valuable previs. So it's just a 2-minute clip from the sequence, but this is actually one of the sequences that was 117 shots. So I did have 5 weeks for this sequence. And also set it up so that everything was moving upon a single device. I set this device to attach everything to it, all the cameras, all the characters, all the vehicles. I could render out any of these shots at 60 miles per hour, 70, 80, or even 90 miles per hour, because on some camera angles, the background moves a bit slower. It's the same speed, but it just is that illusion. And the director's way, could you render this again, but at 80 miles per hour? Okay. So I just changed my controller knob to 80 miles an hour, rendered that shot, and there it was. But I set everything up so that it could be shot at whatever speed the directors decided they wanted to render at.
One thing I find really interesting with this process is individuals like us that were digital never really worked directly with filmmakers, and so in many ways, there's not a lot of people like Safari and Mark, because the process never allowed for a Safari and Mark to work with the directors and the production designers. And so we're here to facilitate people's vision. But we're here to offer solutions. Mark, in many ways, thinks like a director and a writer. He also edits these. He's building the sequence. He's not in isolation, he's just building the shot. And the environment, that environment wasn't created by Safari, but in many ways, we're working with the art director, with the production designers, and we're facilitating their vision as well, so that it ends up at something that looks like what they want. So I really, but the way that he's able to think through like a production designer is because he worked directly with production designers, right? And so I implore all of you to try to understand the mind of the director, the mind of the production designer, the mind of the cinematographer. What do they care about? Why is it that they are part of the product? What are they responsible for? Because it'll actually make you a much better artist, and it'll make whoever wants to work with you appreciate your work that much more.
I think that's the key, is to try and climb into the head of the director and kind of really see what story they want to tell. And I worked on Warhorse with Spielberg, and he typically, someone will come along and say, I want this shot, and they'll describe the shot, how it's going to look. But Spielberg would come along and he would say what he wanted the audience to feel from this shot. There'd be a shot of like Joey was the name of the horse, and he said, I want the audience to feel Joey's, he's really feeling agitated and he's being pushed in the cavalry charge. And so him just describing that, I can see the shot in my head. He did it in such a way that without describing anything visual, just what the emotions and the intent of the shot was, you kind of got this picture anyway. It's very weird. Every director is different, but your job is to literally climb inside the head of the director and see what their vision is, and because you're trying to glean all that information from them to give an accurate previs.
I'll give you another example. On Ant-Man, I worked with Bill Pope. He shot The Matrix, so like that was for me a big moment for me working with him. And when I asked for reference, he straight up told us he doesn't use reference. And we had to work through the emotional, the emotions he wanted to tell through the lighting and through the camera is really how we worked with him. And once we understood his style and the way he thought, it became easier. But that's a lot of what you're going to deal with when you get closer to those high-level creatives. They think in colors and shapes, and and so you're there to facilitate that vision.
Performance capture is.
And then you have mocap integration if you want, right? But from that stepped approach,
all at the same time.
you're able to go, okay, well, how much do I actually need?
Is what you're seeing right here.
Let me see if we can hear this.
Lively. This is a virtual production tool for us to be able to previs and see what our actions are going to be live. This will work for virtual production if we want characters in the background of our scene, some background characters that can actually be directed by the director. Some really cool ideas we have here. It's really neat. We also can just record what we're shooting, and then later go into post and fix some of the things that make mocap feel mocappy. But yes, the way that we do this is we actually.
So he's in front of a computer, and this is, oh, actually, I forgot.
I'm
he's gonna
actually
explain this.
driving our character live. I'm actually driving our character live here in our XSense data. And from XSense, I'm retargeting live inside of Motion Builder. Inside of Motion Builder, I'm then using Live Link to spit it out to game. And you can't see it, but I have an iPhone sitting right in front of my face where I'm able to actually capture my face. There you have it. Our motion capture pipeline in a nutshell. Of course, it's actually a lot more complex than kind of what I'm describing here. There's a lot of intricacies that I just haven't talked about because this is a short video.
So we really just wanted to show that because the work that Mark does is the foundation for everything else, right? You could really easily, after the stepped approach, go and expand it with mocap, or you can start with mocap if you want. But we're really honing in on that story, right? So whatever the best approach for that is.
So really, yeah, the best, it really, you need the basics of what the scene is and all the different things that are needed for previs to understand the scenes. So these characters and environments, they're really just for informing what the kind of environment you're in and the kind of characters that are, the kind of actors that will be there. And this is showing the quality of those different assets. They could be pretty low quality, just to give you the information that you need for the shots when you're blocking it out. And then later on, those could be updated later to a higher quality.
Mark actually walked through this earlier, which is just like his deliverables timeline. This is all going to make it onto LinkedIn eventually. We're going to tweak it a little bit, but you'll be able to find us soon. TechViz. So TechViz is the art of really making all of that something that could be shootable and doing the plan for that. And so we integrate TechViz, like we're doing TechViz all the time as we go. Like I really like having, if it's a effects heavy film, the VFX supervisor there as well, because as you saw in the scouts earlier, Richard Bluff was in there as well. And so as you're working through challenges, it's so nice to have them in there because they discover how to solve those challenges in creative ways. And here's some examples if you're using LED screen of what TechViz looks like. The yellow is the actual screen. This is from Fathead. They were using, at the time when we did this one, a smaller screen. You see the people there. This back here, again, the screen, people. We've had to build a lot of tools to also make this process a lot faster, because now you can also do tech viz during the scouts. And so going from like, this is a pretty picture to make it work for real is something that sometimes you just have to do a little work there. And it's an embodiment of both of their work, right? Like you have the cameras sometimes and the animations from Mark, and then you have the environments and the set decoration from Safari, and then all that turns into a turnover document. It's just showing a little bit of the work. See, showing where the camera's at. Gonna land on a soft mat, the stage. Earlier we mentioned some of the material that's included in those turnovers. We would send them this, we would send them the different aspects that are needed. Let me see if I can skip through. And this was for a film called Payday, where it was kind of it was pitched to us as John Wick, but with a person of color. So like, there's this. Don't be afraid by this image. We actually got a mega grant to build all this material, and we built all the sets, but then the film didn't come to fruition. So now we're using the mega grant to educate, and the mega grant to show the work that we did. And then I think we have one more location. This set, that volume, we're showing a lot of volume work today because it is a Star Wars presentation, but all of this is also done if it's on location, right? Maybe you have something where you have to go into location, and you don't want to have to fly your people to New York, so you want to block some stuff out, and you could do this as well. All right, yeah, to show a little bit of the work, you see how he's laying there? That was actually how they had to shoot that scene. It was, oops, messed that one up. Let's do this real quick, skip forward. And for this scene, we actually did some matte paintings, right? One thing that's really interesting about this process as well, there's no one way to do these things. So we also do matte paintings. The benefit of the process in the parallax and the depth of field after a certain distance, you don't get any of that. So you could just turn that into a card. And that's just as valid as doing it all out of Unreal, and at times, the smartest choice. Especially if you have the previs and you know what the shots are. I actually don't think we showed the finals with the matte painting. I'm gonna have to post it. And deliverables for the tech viz, it's really dependent on the bulk of the project, and it adds, we actually in a 5 to 6 period, all the sets designed prior to the stage and gets a tech viz. So any set designed, any shot gets tech viz. Everything gets tech viz because it's already pretty easy to do if you're already working in it, and we just want to make sure that things are shootable. Like, that's really important to us. So this includes, this Ahsoka breakdown, this is one of the latest videos that we've created, includes both camera ready in-camera VFX sets that were created between 4 to 9 weeks in a time period. It also includes some tech viz. So just letting you know that we put it here because it has a lot of the tech viz for the virtual set design that we wanted to show. But on the left, you'll see these are Unreal Engine environments, and on the right, you have the final shots. And Safari told me a funny story in this one.
Ooh, did
I? He said a lot of this actually was built out of submarine parts.
We use submarine factories for the reference for that place. And one of the things, the smaller structures that hold up the cylinders or the engines, that's straight from a submarine factory. They're scattered off somewhere. No, that's a bigger one. They're actually smaller than that.
So you never know where you're going to find inspiration. A lot of submarine parts for spaceships. This one also went through a lot of iterations. So by the way, like, I do a lot of interviews of Safari to understand the value of this and just really want to know, okay, how much did he do here? So some of what he explained with that one is I went through a lot of iterations where there are multiple, like, it's huge, small, like they really, when you're scouting, they could just have fun and really explore what it is they want to make. So sometimes these sets start really huge and then they shrink down to like just a couple people, especially when the construction is complicated and expensive. Construction teams in the art department are the guys or the people, female, males, they, them, that build the set decoration and or the props. So that's really what they call the construction team or the construction stage of the art department. We adopted that word for the digital construction. So once we do the designs of these, they enter typically a construction stage if needed, because if you have the assets already, like a lot of these warehouses for these productions do have them, you build your warehouse, especially on an episodic thing, I mean, you're producing extremely high-level visuals almost instantaneously. And it's very similar to the mentality of having a warehouse of props or a warehouse of set decoration. So all you see on the left, the planning, but look how similar it all is, right? It's really daunting. So we're definitely proud of the fact that even if we have to pass them off to another team, we're seeing the results of having those decisions made. Happy Mushroom jumping into the narwhal.
Now with ICVFX stands for in-camera VFX, and all those virtual sets that we've been planning in the design phase eventually get to this point, or you can not, yeah, like Felix said, you don't have to use those sets for just ICVFX. The sets that are designed, they can get to the point where they can be used in ICVFX on the screens, and we've had a few projects that have done that. We get to the point where we texture it, we light it, they like it, we put it on the screens for review, because you have to go through that process. You have to review it on the screens to make sure that it's actually looking the way that they hope it would look through the lens. And so once they see that, they can start to, and this would be out throughout the process and the design phase, they can see that in context of the shot, with an actor in front of the camera, that it's actually working well, and maybe don't spend so much time on these assets or this thing. They can actually kind of hone in the budget and the asset like development.
So like in-camera VFX is also, we've seen called Final Pixel. There's a lot of, virtual production is also called digital production, real-time production. Like it's so new that there's just a bunch of words for all of this, so we're trying to boil it down. Virtual set design, like he said, can be used with in-camera VFX or without. In-camera VFX, virtual sets, we typically say instead of saying final pixel sets, because final has the word final pixel, already entails a little bit different than what we're trying to say. We call them, and this is the team that we worked with on The Mandalorian, they call it camera-ready sets. The reason we call them camera-ready sets is because, like he said, you're testing those sets on a stage to see how much further you need to take them. And often, almost every single time when you look at them in Unreal, if you were just doing a turntable or working traditionally, you're going to want to take it further. There's so much that gets warped and looks real when the ground comes in and you're looking at it through the lens, or if you're just looking into the LED, things really look different. So we do a lot of testing within, if we're on an in-camera VFX project, we do a lot of testing. We might test it within week 2 if it's the color and light, because maybe you just have to take it to color and light. There's been a lot of sets where we just, week 2, week 3, they're ready. But maybe they don't. Maybe they need a construction stage because they have a bunch of assets, right? So it really is important for us to also, I think I've said important for us maybe 1,000 times, to to also look at things in context and continue looking at things in context. And so this is another one of those that when we're working on these shows, we're always trying to look at them in context because we want to reduce waste. So on The Mandalorian and on those projects, planning for that sometimes is tough. During lunch break, they were doing tests and checking the shots sometimes early in the morning, sometimes at night. But it really does allow them to not have to take it too far.
And so these are 3 sets that were used on season 2, episode 5. This planet called Perth, or this location called Perth. These are using pretty similar assets that are shared, except for the Magistrate's Courtyard. It doesn't use burnt trees, but the first and last, the Mando Landing and Dry Riverbed, they use a lot of the same assets. So like charred ground, charred trees. We had to make sure that it wasn't the exact same environment, so we ended up getting some more witchy-looking trees in the Dry Riverbed. And then with the Magistrate's Courtyard, it's a completely different build. But with these sets, we spent a lot of time with understanding what the intent for that scene was, or those scenes. And we planned a lot with the DP to make sure that we understood the directions to work on. And with the Magistrate Courtyard, he specifically had an idea, him and Filoni talked about it, of one angle, or always working towards one direction. And so we never concentrated on the right side of the set. We always concentrated on the left side. And a lot of the elements in that, all of the assets, they look similar since we spent a lot of time with the production designer and the DP to make sure that we are working on the right things. And so we, in the next slide, you'll see that there's a little bit of a comparison of like it's a small comparison. There are other things that are similar, like the chunk of branches on the ground. This is, I don't know if you can even see this, but the top of that tree has a little divot. And then in another shot, the similar silhouette of another trunk. And so since we spent a lot of time with production designer DP to make sure we were understanding the kind of assets that they were going to have on the physical set and the ones that he was always seeing in his head, and then the DP with the lighting, even though they ended up shifting it a little bit more blue for this scene, it's all very similar. And it's great to see, even though another team went and reconstructed it and relit it and prepped it for the LED screens, the similarities are there. And it's great to make sure that we have that end result look so good, and make sure that everyone understands what it's going to look like. We spent a lot of time with making sure that everyone knows what they're going to get in the end.
For a lot of these projects, we actually delivered them to ILM, and we had to go back and do our own homework to see what actually made it to the screen, and we learned that a lot, all of it, if not a lot, made it to the screen. So this is an example of what 3 sets could do for you, right? Like, these took around 9 weeks to create 3 final pixel sets, or 3 camera-ready sets, or 3 VAD sets during the design phase that were taken a lot further, right? And so these 9 weeks got them 19 minutes of runtime covered on one episode. So the episode was 40 minutes, 19 minutes of that were those sets. If you plan your production right, that's 9 weeks of work that covered you. 9 weeks plus maybe it took optimization and some work to make them run smoothly on the stage, just add a couple weeks to that, 2 to 3 weeks, right? That's, I think for those producers out there, how many shots is 19 minutes if you had to quantify them one at a time in a traditional VFX pipeline? I guarantee you this process was cheaper. And so some of the stats, I mean, we just put this in here, but if you look at the bulk, on season 1, we were producing around 45 plus real-time sets. By Ahsoka, you have 70 plus, similar team, much higher quality, and 380 plus virtual scouts, and then it takes a smaller dip down in skeleton crew. But all of this had similar teams, similar structures. When I'm saying similar teams, we're not talking about teams that actually went through all of this. The quality raised because of the tools and the assets, but we actually had to swap out a lot of the artists for students and or artists that were at frankly, the budget that they had, and then we would grab some of those trained artists and we would take them to other projects that were at the level that they can do, right? Because there's different roles on a project. On these, we had around 16 artists, and so you have the asset builders who are building those assets or constructing those designs, right? And if you go up from there, you have your lead who is helping the art director drive the project. So this is just an example of, we actually gave some of this data all summed up. This actually doesn't have one of the key ones, which is the virtual stage walks, because those happen every day. On Mandalorian, the art directors and the production designer, pretty much every day they would jump in there and really just, hey, let's look at the set. That is something that it can be daunting probably in VFX, because rendering something could take a long time, but everything's lit, everything's real time, and it gives you a different process. Really wanted to show, we've talked a lot about it's more singular. Virtual production definitely requires, as it scales, it gets more complicated, and so this is the top right, you have an example of what a team looks like for a scale of a project that would go for almost a year, right? Like that's like around 16 artists, but they're producing 200 plus virtual sets and hundreds more variants, different lighting scenarios, set decoration, setups, and then bottom left is a shot grid that he used to manage those things and where all the visuals, the notes are captured, the timelines. You see here, there's like different stages. That's 6 weeks, Safari? This right here?
Probably more like close to 7.
7 weeks, so there you go. On Ahsoka, they also gave the team a little more time. When we started on the Mandalorian season 1, they were like, you have 5 weeks. We showed them the quality of work we could do in that time, we did it. Ahsoka, the quality was a lot higher, and they gave them a week or 2 longer, but because they also had because they had that time, and then we also had tools to make things easier to import and get everything appropriately, it just made everything faster and easier. And so we have a timeline here. You know, the truth with this one, it's an art director, virtual set support, and tech support. The amount of time that it takes to create or take these further, it could be just optimization, like if you're going to get it on the stage, LED screen stage, or even for a final VFX shot, because we're actually doing that even on a very large project right now where we're making these backgrounds for the traditional VFX workflow. 1 to 10 weeks is what it could run you to take those to that final quality. And what is it that's happening in those 1 to 10 weeks? Construction. Like the design's already done, you already know what everyone wants. How much further do you need to take it to get that shot? Maybe there's fluids. Maybe there's a river. These are the things that take 10 weeks. Maybe there's a junkyard, and it's all alien parts that are recognizable in some form or fashion. So you need to go and meticulously model all those things. And so when I was supervising Mandalorian Season 1, we had a design team of around 6 people. And then we had a construction team of around 6 people. And so the design team, with the modern tools, while you're designing, everything goes up to the cloud. The team that's making the props, they can see things in context if they have the right permission to see it. But you can also just have it where when they update, your props update in all your scenes. Let's say you had a barrel, you're using a temporary one, you put it all over. The moment that asset is updated, it updates everywhere. And that is how you see things in context. You have multiple teams running in tandem, the layout team building layout, the asset builders or the construction team building the construction, etc., and they all meet at the same time. Here's a little consolidation of everything but these two. So it has Mandalorian Season 1, 2, 3, Obi-Wan, and Boba Fett. Can you talk, what are the names of these sets? Can you talk to the
This
names?
is Mandalore. This is the Mines. This is Ringworld Meet something. I don't know what this city is called. That's the Magistrate's Courtyard. That's one of this season 1 set. That was actually one of the tougher ones.
Yeah,
To get
so-
those sculpts actually right.
Yeah.
The rock walls that are coming over. Andrew Jones was very particular about those. Back to Perth in the driver bed.
So to the left, you can see, whenever we're doing the left and right, the one on the left is the version that we were designing, and then the right is the final shot. I mean, look at this, right? Like, this is so close.
Yeah, that one was, we had made it a certain way in season 1. The walls were textured a certain way and everything was laid out a certain way. And we ended up bringing that back. Andrew Jones wanted they wanted to get that same asset. He liked the certain feel for the dirt collection. So we brought that back in season 3, and that's what this one is.
Did you guys have to tweak it?
We tweaked some of the textures that were on the assets, like the set dressing,
Nice.
and then relit the place.
Obi-Wan. You see, that one worked out great. They made the screen the wall. Easy. I mean, he showed you this example earlier, and he was showing in 3 phases. I don't remember seeing this one this far, but you can see where these shots came from.
Ringworld was tough. That underbelly, that one was tough. Even though the concept at the beginning was it was great. It was very simple and a platform they walked on. But it went through a lot of iterations of what they can do on the LED screens, where they're going to actually position the action. So it went through 4 major revamps.
For this one?
That one right there, yeah.
Nice. Oops. Let's do this. All right. And, I'm just going to end it with, this is really, if you were going to look at us in a nutshell, the part that we didn't go into is our game development brain. We just put a game together recently. We have a lot of stuff there. And so I'll end it with this page and open it to Q&A. Thank you, guys.
Thank you all so much. If you have a question, go ahead and raise your hand. We're going to take just a few. Okay, I see you right in the middle. If you have your hand up, just keep it up, and I'm going to keep a mental cue. But here you are. First question.
Great panel, thanks. How much of this is, systemized, or like when you're doing this for Mandalorian, we're figuring out all from scratch, it sounds like. How much now are there programs that help you do this, or have you built the programs, or other people built the programs? Are you still kind of figuring everything out piecemeal from project to project? And if there are programs, which ones should we learn?
Yeah. Well, funny enough, it's all the similar stuff that you're already learning. It's the process that's evolving. So we're modeling and texturing in Maya, Max, Photoshop, Substance Painter. Sometimes the effects are done with Houdini. It's the centralized hub of a lot of these things is Unreal. And so that's really the newest tool or the newest member at the party. But everything else that you're learning is going to work and is going to be something you can use. I think, what else do you think?
Well, it very much is about the process of rethinking it or having an understanding of the way to make these sets and to review those. It's not really a setup or a software to learn for that. It's a simple script breakdown, here are the sets, and then you make those through this process of quick iteration, and Unreal's, like you said, the hub for that, which is the biggest thing to learn, because the tips, the kind of workflow is, before Lumen, you had to understand light baking and all these different things. Then you had to understand, or then we had to learn how to break it and break it well. So it's just about like using those same tools that you learn.
But are there softwares in there that you could recommend?
No. No.
This process definitely gets more complex as you scale, right? And but when you're learning here, and if you're going to Nomen, it's really about learning how to use Maya, learning your craft, learn how to model. Doesn't matter what you use. We're going to look at it, and if it looks good, you're welcome to the party. A lot of our tools are actually, if I was going to show you guys another slide here, like these are a suite of tools that are built to make what you're saying easier. Since we're building teams that are from games, from film, and from previs, or from game tech, from VFX, lighting and environments, and from stories previs. These three parties use slightly different software. You might have 3ds Max for Game Guy. Or if you're working with an art department, they're working with Rhino or with some of these softwares that are more like built for architectural design and more precision. The tools make it where you don't have to worry about that anymore. Like, we bring those teams, we can build those teams from different places, and then we have importers that does the rest of the work for you, right? Now, if you're an individual and you're not worrying about these things, you don't have to worry about the scale and about being able to gather hundreds of notes then you're all of a sudden someone that just needs to worry about your own craft. And what you use for your own craft, that's up to you, right? That's the beauty of the modern day. The craft, what I would recommend is just making sure that you are building something that is beautiful or something that's you, because the tools are pretty accessible and just the same stuff that's have been used for a long time.
First of all, thank you for the presentation. It was amazing and awe-inspiring, and just, you guys are fantastic, so thank you for that.
Thank you.
My question is going to that final pixel that you had mentioned, right? So when you do stuff in virtual production and Unreal, it has to be performant. You have to make sure everything is there, that your processes, your Bromptons, everything can run it, and your frame rate won't tank. What do you do when you have apps like Houdini, right, where you can make a photorealistic ocean, clouds, city that's just beautiful in the final render, but would tank the performance in Unreal? What's the compromise for that, where you want to do a real-time shoot, but you still want to have all the beauty that you can get in offline, right? Is it like maybe something to do with USD and like you're payloading your way in? Is it sharing materials like Material X? Like, how do we go where we're not forgetting about the other apps that have been created and just like, Unreal, it's only Unreal, right? Like, we want to be able to bring in everything.
Great question, by the way.
Thank you. We want to be able to bring in everything so that the audience, in the end, they see the best that can be.
Bringing everything isn't always what serves the story, right? And you wanting to show everything isn't the director's vision. So it's important to play the game of what's needed for the story, because you are right. Bringing it to Unreal and having this process, I can't even speak to what they do to optimize it and make it run in real time. Like, I don't even know what the fuck they do up there. But they have to optimize everything, and it's like you have 10 apples, and everything takes an apple frame rate. And you have to use those apples appropriately. In pre-production, if you don't have to do a virtual location scout with a VR, you don't have to worry about 2 apples, like less apples to play with or less frame rate to play with. I'm going to use a different analogy. That's not working. So that's not working. I just confused you some more. Long story short, when you're working with Unreal, you're going to have frame rate, and everything takes frame rate. If you go to an LED screen stage and you're going to shoot on a stage, the stage itself takes some of the frame rate. So your set needs to be even more optimized versus if you were just going to render it. You can't get away from that. Not if you want to do in-camera VFX where the set is real time. You can't get away from that. Now, what you can do is design your water in Houdini, bring it into Unreal, check it out on the stage, and see how much you can remove to get it to run at frame rate, but still have your shot, have it be real time, and then if you have to enhance it, you enhance it. You got the color data, you can get all the capture data, you have all the assets, you have, right? So there's multiple ways to work with something, let's say like an ocean, still do it on a stage, but still enhance it, because maybe you are able to get 90% of it there, like the flow of the water feels good and stuff, but maybe the crash on the fucking boat and all that steam, and that has to be post, right? So planning, you already knew that this was gonna happen because if you use this process, you already knew. Like if you planned this in pre-production, if you did some previs, or if you work with Safari on some layout, you're already anticipating it. Then you get to a little bit further, and then you start doing tests on the stage. You're already anticipating it even further. So you're gonna be able to plan through that, and at the end, if it's something unattainable, then hey, you should absolutely go the traditional VFX route. There's no reason to use this for things that it's not gonna actually give you the cost savings and or the quality. So that's why you get a team that can help you, or that's why you do this process so that you can actually work with the director and they can get that help to visualize it, because you are making those decisions and you have to be, we've seen too many projects run into difficulties because they're not considering the optimization. It's super important. Great question.
So we have two final questions for you, one here and one here. So I'm going to set you up right now.
Hello? Okay, oh my gosh. Hi.
Hi.
My name is Lindsay.
Hi, Lindsay.
So I'm going to graduate from Noman very soon.
Congrats.
Thank you. I'm sorry for like the very cliche question, but what advice would you give to someone who's going from, you know, being in school to finding a job in the industry or like wanting to work?
What do you do?
So I do environments for games right now, but after your talk, previs sounds pretty cool.
Hey, previs.
Wow. I mean, I wish I'd gone to a school like this. When I went to school, there was one school in England that you could do a degree in animation. Every other school, you could do a degree in graphic design and specialize in animation, but there's only one school that me and James Baxter both went to do animation. But so I've never had that challenge that you've had. My scenario was taking a VHS and my portfolio into London on the tube, leaving it at a studio for a week, coming back and hoping someone looked at it in that time. I think nowadays you guys have so much more tools in your belt because you have, you know, you can send a link to somebody in an email and they can look at your reel. You can get it out there. My suggestion to you would just be to post your stuff. I would generate stuff and post it online. Post it, because we look online and we see great stuff. I mean, who's that? You know, and you take an interest. That's mainly where we find out people, is we discover them. So you just want to advertise yourself, I would say. Does that answer your question in any way? The main thing is just to generate work, you know. Even if you've not got a job, you should be just, you know, doing it at home. If it's your passion, it just comes out. When I've not got a project to work on, I'm working on a project with Safari. It's just our project that we're working on because we just love doing this stuff. Just generate work and you'll get discovered, I think.
Are you doing, you said game environments as well?
Yes.
The entire environment, making the models?
Yes.
laying out the set, like level design, or what's the? And are you photorealistic or do you like stylized?
I've been doing more stylized work, but I've been focusing on like realistic right now to kind of balance out my portfolio. So a little bit both.
That's good. That's good to have range, but I think having a well-structured environment, a scale, a story that's built into it, is what I look for with previs and whatever other environment. If it's got great cameras, make sure your framing's okay. You have to present the environment that you're building. It's kind of a tough one because I remember just wanting to build the environment and not necessarily showing that off. So work on some cameras and that kind of thing. Lighting is super important.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
It's funny. Hi, my name's Josh.
Hi, Josh.
I'm from CSUN, Cal State Northridge, and my perspective is a little weirdly specific because our school has a virtual LED wall, and there's only about 15 students that we know how to use it. There's no faculty support. No one knows how to use it, and we're trying to make as many short films as we can to convince them that this is worth their time. And I'm very curious, what are, like, as far as virtual production goes, what are the most, like, what are, like, lighting conditions that are gonna look the best on virtual production? That's a little broad, I guess, but.
No, that's good.
I love that.
That's his jam.
Through the past several years, I've learned that it's all about indirect light, directional indirect light. You can sneak in some sunlight, but it looks so good when it's overcasty or dusk. We use sunlight. I don't know the setup of your stage as well. It's tiny. Could fit in this place, yeah.
What's small? Could you describe it?
20
Like-
feet?
20 by 9 feet tall.
Okay. Curved or flat?
Slight curve.
Okay.
Ceiling?
No ceiling. And you can't get, wide shots are impossible. You can't get too far back. And the pixel density is big enough where you can't get it in focus, has to be very shallow. We know every way that it doesn't work.
Yeah.
More valuable. More valuable.
It's definitely a tough little setup, but do you put backgrounds with a lot of detail, like skies with cloud detail or hot spots?
For the most part, what's worked out the best is mostly urban settings. There's something with, just shouting. So far, what's been the most successful is extreme high contrast, low lighting, mostly key lights that we can match with the actors. Whenever we do skies, we can't do midday. We have not been able to do midday, like you guys were saying. Dusk, dawn, nighttime, those are easy. And especially, what we can't do at all is water, because the bokeh keeps breaking. The frustrum just makes it impossible.
So a couple things here to help guide you through why it is that maybe you're having some of these complexities. The stage is not good at lighting at all, unless you have a 360 or a 180 or enough screen to light. Where you're lacking potentially here is a gaffer. You need a film gaffer to join your team. You could probably find a student that would freaking die to join you on this. That's a gaffer. And so the exercise that I think you want to practice with your gaffer is how to get the additional lighting that is outside of the frame to match the lighting that's on the screen. And so if you have a sky, The reason why dusk works so well is because you don't have to worry about the light that's coming up here, right? That's why the high contrast works. But if you want to have a daytime, you need to consider that there's a roof that needs lighting, like it's a sky, you need lighting up here, you need lighting up here, you need lighting back here. So you want to consider all of that. If you plan your scene in Unreal, you choose your sky, you see where your screen is, you're going to see what color you need for all of the rest around you. Start there. Try to match the colors with your gaffer and see if it works. And start there.
Thank you.
All right, everyone, give it up one more time for Narwhal. So Felix, thank you so much. If people want to stay up to date with what y'all are doing, I see it on the screen there, but what I don't see is any social handles. Do you all?
Find us on LinkedIn. There you go.
Sounds great. Thank you all for
Felix.
coming here for another great Gnomon industry event. Thank you at home. And if you want to stay up to date with Gnomon and what we do here, as well as other great live events that we're going to have here, go ahead and visit us at gnomon.edu. And until next time, we'll see ya.